There is a moment that almost no one sees coming. Not when you were crying, not when you were over-explaining, not when you were staring at your phone, reading the same cold message 10 different ways, trying to find a pulse inside it. Not when you were still available, still soft, still willing to turn your pain into patience. No. The moment an avoidant truly feels you is the moment you go quiet. The moment your energy stops reaching for them like a hand in the dark. The moment your nervous system, exhausted from chasing clarity from someone who only offered confusion, finally begins to let go. That is when something shifts. Because while you thought your silence would make you disappear in their mind, it often does the opposite. It makes you louder. It makes your absence echo. It forces them to sit in a space where your warmth used to be, and for the first time, they can't control the distance. They can't predict your next text. They can't rely on your hurt to keep the bond alive. And that is when the panic starts. Not always visibly, not always dramatically. Avoidants are not known for honest panic. Their fear rarely looks like fear. It looks like delay, like random check-ins, like liking a story at 1:12 a.m., like just seeing how you are, like a sudden memory, like an old song, like a door opening just enough to see if you'll run back through it. But underneath all of that is something deeper, a threat response. Because the brutal truth is this: as long as you were chasing, they could stay asleep. As long as you were the one trying to repair, to understand, to bridge the silence, they never had to fully feel the loss. Your pursuit protected them from reality. It gave them the illusion that no matter how disconnected they became, you would still be there, translating their distance into depth, calling their confusion complexity, calling their withdrawal a wound you could heal. And maybe that's the truth that hurts the most. You thought your love was proving your value. But sometimes, in the mind of an avoidant, your endless availability simply becomes background safety. They start to experience you less as a person they could lose and more as emotional infrastructure, something steady, something forgiving, something that absorbs impact. Until one day, it doesn't. Until one day, you stop. And then their body notices before their mind can explain it. This is the part no one tells you. Avoidant attachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the fear of feeling too much. People think avoidants don't care because they look calm when they pull away.
But what often happens internally is the exact opposite. Their system gets flooded. Intimacy, dependency, emotional expectation, vulnerability. It all begins to press against old wiring that learned closeness was dangerous, engulfing, disappointing, or unsafe. So when love gets real, their amygdala, the part of the brain scanning for threat, can misread connection itself as danger. Their nervous system doesn't say, "This is beautiful, stay." It says, "Too much, back away, regain control." And when they back away, cortisol rises, stress sharpens, numbness becomes a form of self-protection, distance gives them relief, space feels like oxygen. They tell themselves they need time, freedom, perspective. They convince themselves the connection was too intense, too complicated, too emotionally demanding. But here's the deeper truth. Relief is not peace.
What so many avoidants call freedom is often just deactivation, a temporary numbing of attachment distress, a way of muting the signal. And that works, for a while. Until your energy disappears, until the text they expected doesn't come, until the emotional supply they took for granted is gone. Then the nervous system flips again, because now the threat is no longer closeness, now the threat is loss. And loss hits differently when the person you lost is no longer reaching back. That's when dopamine enters the story. Not in some romantic, cinematic way, in a raw, biological one. The brain becomes obsessed with what feels uncertain, unavailable, interrupted. What once felt guaranteed becomes scarce. What was emotionally predictable becomes unstable. And suddenly, the same person they kept at arm's length starts occupying their mind with disturbing intensity. You. The one who stopped reacting. The one who stopped explaining. The one who no longer needs to be chosen in order to choose themselves. That is incredibly destabilizing to someone who built their emotional comfort around distance. Because your silence does something your words never could. It removes their shield. Silence becomes the mirror. And in that mirror, they are left alone with questions they spent months outrunning. What if they really are gone? What if I misread everything? What if they meant more to me than I admitted? What if I was only calm because they were carrying the whole connection for both of us? What if I didn't lose interest? What if I lost access? That is the moment of realization. Not that you were perfect, not that they suddenly became emotionally evolved overnight, but that your presence was regulating something in them they never named. Your attention, your consistency, your emotional labor. It soothed the exact abandonment wound they claimed not to have. And now that it's gone, they feel the drop. You have to understand this, because if you don't, you'll misinterpret the final panic move as love. And sometimes, it isn't. Sometimes it is grief wrapped in ego. Sometimes it is longing mixed with possession. Sometimes it is not, I am ready to love you better. Sometimes it is, I can feel you slipping out of the role I assigned you, and my nervous system does not know what to do with that. That is why the final panic move can be so confusing. It may come as warmth where there was once coldness, curiosity where there was once indifference, sudden vulnerability, a message that sounds more emotionally open than anything they've ever sent. A confession, a memory, a late night, I miss you. A question about whether you're seeing someone. A perfectly timed return the moment they sense your detachment is real. And if you've been starving, even crumbs feel like a feast. That's the danger. Because when you've spent so long begging for emotional proof, the smallest sign of life can feel holy. Your body remembers the hope before your mind remembers the pattern. Your heart starts writing a new story before the old one has even finished bleeding out. This is why so many people go back at the exact moment they were finally becoming free. They mistake the avoidance panic for transformation. But panic is not transformation. Panic is exposure. It is what happens when avoidance stops working. Picture them alone at night. The room is quiet, but not peaceful. They're holding their phone, putting it down, picking it up again. They tell themselves they're just curious. They wonder if you're out, if you're laughing, if someone else is now hearing the tenderness they were too defended to receive. They replay your last conversation. They remember your eyes when you finally got tired. They remember the version of you who waited. And for the first time, instead of feeling crowded by your love, they feel haunted by its absence. They check your page. They notice you're different. Not louder, not bitter, just gone in a way they can't access. That's the part that unsettles them most. Not your anger, not your speeches, not even your pain. Your peace. Because your peace exposes how much chaos the old dynamic required. When you stop reacting, the game dies. When the game dies, reality enters. And reality is merciless. Reality says, they loved you in the proportions they could, but not in the ways you needed. Reality says, their overwhelm was real, but so was your suffering. Reality says, understanding their wounds does not require you to abandon yourself inside them. And if they feel panic now, it does not erase the nights you spent regulating a connection that kept destabilizing you. Still, let's be honest about what they feel in this moment. They don't stop caring. That was never the full story. They detach because they feel too much without knowing how to metabolize it. They split closeness into pressure. They translate intimacy into obligation. They need you, then resent needing you. They miss you, then mute you. They want the connection, but panic when it asks for presence. So they leave mentally before they leave physically. And when you are finally no longer there to soften the impact, all the delayed emotion comes rushing in like water through a broken wall. That is why the final panic move can feel so intense. It often contains everything they would not let themselves feel in real time. The fear, the tenderness, the regret, the jealousy, the ache, the hunger for reunion. But intensity is not the same as consistency, and this is where your power begins. Not in making them miss you, not in forcing them to chase, not in winning some silent war. Your power begins in your ability to remain anchored while someone else is finally feeling the consequences of your absence. That is not cruelty. That is self-respect. For once, you are not the one in panic. For once, you are not building emotional bridges towards someone standing on the other side with crossed arms. For once, your nervous system is learning that love does not have to be pursued at the cost of your dignity. And that changes everything. Because when you stop feeding the pattern starves. No more anxious over-explaining. No more decoding the subtext of minimal effort. No more turning inconsistency into mystery. No more calling scraps a soulmate bond just because it hurt deeply. You begin to see clearly. Their distance was not proof that you were hard to love. It was proof that they were at war with closeness, and you were never supposed to win that war for them. That realization is devastating and liberating. Because now, if they return, you can see the return for what it is. You can feel the pull without obeying it. You can hear the softness in their voice and still ask, what has actually changed? You can allow compassion without surrendering your boundaries. You can understand their psychology without volunteering to be injured by it again. This is the warning no one gives enough. The moment an avoidant realizes you've moved on is often the exact moment they become most emotionally dangerous. Not because they are evil, because they are dysregulated. Because loss activates what intimacy once activated, but now it's sharpened by scarcity. So they may reach for you with a level of urgency that feels profound. They may seem more open than ever, more present, more affected, more desperate to reconnect. And if you are still secretly hoping they will finally become who you needed all along, you may open the door too quickly. You may hand them access before there is evidence. You may offer your healed heart to someone who is only visiting their feelings, not rebuilding their patterns. And then the cycle starts again. They come close. You melt. The hope floods in. Their nervous system stabilizes because you're available again. The threat of losing you lowers. And once safety returns, so does distance. Not because you imagined it, because the pattern was never broken, only interrupted. So if they come back, do not be hypnotized by timing. Be anchored in truth. A real return is not a dramatic message. It is sustained emotional accountability. It is the capacity to stay present after the reunion high fades. It is their willingness to tolerate closeness without punishing you for it later. It is repair, consistency, transparency, action that survives discomfort. Anything less is just another version of the same wound wearing a more beautiful face. And now we arrive at the part that matters most. You. Not the version of you who waited by the door, the version emerging now. The version who finally understands that being deeply loving does not mean being endlessly available to confusion. The version who no longer confuses intensity with intimacy. The version who can feel the pull of an old bond and still choose not to betray their own peace. This is the identity shift. You are no longer trying to be unforgettable to someone emotionally unavailable. You are becoming unavailable to what diminishes you. Feel the difference. One is hunger. The other is power. One says, "Please see my value." The other says, "I see it, and that is enough to change my life." Because the truth is, when an avoidant realizes you've moved on, the final panic move is not the real climax of the story. Your detachment is. Your return to yourself is. The day your body no longer treats their inconsistency like a drug is. The day your worth stops negotiating with someone else's capacity is. That is the real ending. Or maybe the real beginning. Because from this place, love stops being a courtroom where you argue your case. It becomes a place where you are met or you walk. It becomes simple. Not easy, but clean. Not perfect, but reciprocal. You stop performing your pain in the hope that someone will finally understand it. You stop shrinking your needs so someone can stay. You stop translating breadcrumbs into promises. And suddenly, life becomes quieter, but not emptier, cleaner. Your sleep changes. Your skin changes. Your thoughts stop revolving around one person's emotional weather. Your nervous system learns a new language. Safety without pursuit. Desire without desperation. Solitude without abandonment. And the most beautiful part? When you truly move on, you stop needing to know whether they are panicking. You stop needing proof that they miss you. You stop waiting for the cinematic return, the apology, the collapse, the message that confirms you mattered. Because your healing has already confirmed it. Your grief confirmed it. The fact that it hurt this much confirmed it. You mattered. You were not too much. You were not hard to love. You were simply offering depth to someone who had not yet learned how to stay inside it. That is their tragedy, not yours. Your story changes the moment you stop making their fear your responsibility. So if they come back with trembling words, with late realizations, with the final panic move they withheld until your silence became real. Breathe. Listen. Observe. But do not abandon yourself to rescue a connection that only wakes up when it is starving. Let them feel the consequences of losing access to someone who loved deeply. Let them sit with the emptiness your overgiving once covered. Let reality do what your explanations never could. And you, keep walking. Not because you never cared, but because you finally do. About yourself. About your peace. About the version of you that no longer needs to bleed to feel bonded. This is what power looks like after heartbreak. It is not loud. It does not announce itself. It does not beg to be witnessed. It is the calm in your chest where chaos used to live. It is the steady hand that no longer reaches for what keeps retreating. It is the quiet knowing that anyone who truly wants to love you will not require you to disappear in order to stay. So let the avoidant have their moment of realization. Let them feel the silence. Let them wonder. Let them panic if they must. But do not confuse their awakening with your assignment. You are not here to teach someone how to stop fearing love. You are here to become someone who no longer fears losing what cannot meet you. And once that happens, everything changes. Because the moment they realize you've moved on is often the same moment you realize you've finally come home to yourself.